Hey guys, welcome to week 3 of the exchange. It's so nice to have you all with us. Today we are doing another week about relationships. Last week we talked about partnered relationships. This week we are talking about relationships with pretty much everyone else. So with kids, we're having a focus on kids. We're having a focus on aging parents or aging ourselves. And then we have a third person that's sort of just talking about general relationships with folks. So we're going to get started. Catherine, would you like to introduce our speakers?
Absolutely. We have Claire and Taylor here, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves and what they do and who they are and what they're passionate about. Why are you here today? So, Claire, do you mind going first?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, my name is Claire Saunders Clough, and I serve as one of the congregational care pastors at Church of the Resurrection at the Leawood campus. And my primary role there is I serve as the director of Silverlink Ministry. So, Silverlink Ministry pre-COVID was the ministry that connected with anyone who couldn't make it to church physically. And so that would be folks who lived in senior living communities, folks who you might call homebound, who are either isolated at home or don't have transportation, things like that. And I sort of became passionate about that from really early on. It was a part of my call story to ministry. And long story short, when I got to seminary, I was terrified of preaching, and I went to my dean and I said, "Please don't put me in an internship where I have to preach yet. I'm not ready for that." And so I got to serve as a chaplain for a memory care unit at a United Methodist retirement home, and that's when I just fell in love with the work. So a lot of my background has to do with dementia care, caregiver support, that sort of thing. So that's what I love to do, and I'll pause there. Yes.
Yeah,
Awesome.
that sounds great.
Cool.
So all the people that couldn't get to church, then the whole congregation became under your care once COVID hit, huh?
It's true. We had a lot of conversations of, oh, how do we make these designations now? So we're
Oh,
kind of we're now using sort of an age limit, but as you all know, age is just a construct. So we're figuring it out as we go.
Yeah.
oh, wow.
Yeah, we have congregants in this church in their 90s that could work me under the rug here. So that's
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're up next, Taylor, with the same question.
Yay. Well, yeah, thanks for having me. I am excited. Like they said, my name is Taylor Ogden Thomas, and I actually serve at with Claire in a different department. I'm at Church of the Resurrection in the Leawood campus as well. I work with teenagers, so 6th grade through 12th grade. And I have been here at the church for 16 years and been in youth ministry for going on 20 years now. So I like to think I'm not that old, but I am. So I would like to let you guys all know that Catherine and Andy were both my interns at one point. So that is really showing you how old I am. So but they're fantastic, and it's been fun to watch them grow up and get married and have kids and all that kind of stuff. So um, I love youth ministry. I have worked with primarily middle schoolers for the most of my career, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and a lot of people are think that middle school is awkward. I think that they're awesome. So they're awkwardly awesome. And maybe that just fits who I am. I'm not sure, but I do love it. I love it because teenagers don't quite know who they are yet. And it's a great time to talk about how their faith can be a big time. And I think that also we grow up, and whatever we get as a teenager when it comes to our faith really forms who we are as an adult. And so it's pivotal time. I grew up in the church, so I've just been a church lover for a long time. I didn't know I would go into ministry. I actually wanted to be a singer. I was going to be the next Trisha Yearwood. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So youth ministry called my name, and I've been at 3 churches, and I honestly don't know what else I would do. It really is my calling. I do love it. It's frustrating, but some of my most exciting and precious moments for me is when I get to be one-on-one with students, and like especially in crisis and stuff like that. So that's who I am. I'm a busy mom. I'm a single mom, actually, of 3 little boys. Actually, I say little. My oldest entered middle school this year, so which is very crazy for me because I've devoted my whole life to teenage ministry, and he's getting to that age and I'll have no idea what I'm doing. So with my own kid, but so I have a 11, a 9, and then a 6-year-old. So we're busy, and balance is a tough one for me sometimes, but here I am. So what I like to do in my spare time, because I looked at Catherine's notes that she sent me, I would say that I don't have a lot of spare time. And so all of my activities are my boys' activities. So you're looking at the new assistant coach of my 9-year-old's basketball team. Like I needed that. So, but I'm excited.
Oh, Taylor, that's awesome. That's awesome. A couple things. Time really flies. I cannot believe your kids are that old. We've known each other for a long time now. I was almost a youth when you met me, which is not fair because I look older than you do, which life is cruel sometimes. But also, it's really, really good to have both of you here. Taylor and Claire, we respect a lot your gifts and graces, which is why we've invited you specifically to this. And you're both experts at what you do. So we're so thankful to have you.
Yeah. So, okay, I tried to come up with a bunch of questions that I think will be helpful for people right now that are relevant. And so the first question I had is kind of a generalization, and I understand because it's generalization, it might be hard to answer, but how would you help us get into the minds of the population that you serve right now? So how would you help us get into the mind of those that are elderly, that are, for instance, homebound, or also teenagers and kids? I kind of put both of those on you, Taylor. Kind of what are they going through? What are some anecdotal experiences you've heard about? How do you feel for them in this time?
Sure, I'm happy to run with that. I appreciate you calling me an expert. I find a lot of my expertise just comes from the honor of being able to journey with a lot of people in this age group, so most of my wisdom just comes from what people are willing to share when they're in their older years. So one thing that we're finding particularly difficult right now for those who are elderly, whether they're isolated or whether it's just the nature of going through a global pandemic when you're in your golden years. If you think about your arc of life, when you're coming into those final years, most people have some type of goal or wisdom that they're really hoping to pass down. It might be financial security. It might be imparting certain wisdom to their kids or their grandkids. It might be pursuing a hobby that they've never pursued before. Even if they're not physically able, there's still lots of things that people can access in their older years. And COVID has really put a big damper on that. And it's hard, particularly for people who are facing end of life, whether that's this year or 10 years from now. It's hard to reimagine and process all of that without experiencing a lot of grief. Grief is really a big part of what a lot of this demographic is feeling right now, because things that they had hoped for and been planning for and saving for are cut off in a lot of ways. And trying to reimagine that either through Zoom, which many older adults are very tech savvy, but for some folks, it's just inaccessible. They might not even have a laptop to try it. And so trying to reinvent that sort of wheel can be a really big struggle right now. So I would say a theme of a lot of the conversations I'm having with my congregants is just various parts of the grief journey.
That makes a lot of sense.
So I'll start on the very way end of pregnancy. I have seen a lot of families, right, like going through their first or maybe their second child, and during this season of uncertainty. And I have often thought, oh no, like, that's so hard. I watched a friend of mine not be able to, have visitors in her last months, and then the baby was born and there was no big celebratory, or a baptism, and there's just the mom and dad, and there's masks, and and so like there is definitely some adjustments there. for that. So there's been a sense of loss, kind of like Claire had said, for sure, for those families with very little ones. Now, when it comes to the kids kind of portion, I would definitely say in their minds, a lot of them, parents have done a good job for the most part of not letting a lot of disruption be felt, I guess. The beauty of this kind of time frame is that it was kind of over summer, and it's like go outside and play. Now, I will say in my own neighborhood, what was interesting is that things were, a lot of parents were kind of looking at each other like, well, do we let them play with each other? Do we not let them play? And there was not any playing. And then all of a sudden it kind of loosened up a little bit, and then everybody was like, okay, but I think that like what has happened is, for kids is that they are way more resilient than we are. And they have been able to go with the flow a lot more. We're having a lot of the whole mask debate, right? And students really, if you ask them, they're okay. They're fine. They don't like it, but they're okay with it, right? Because it's just something that they accept better than we as adults do, that it's just something that they have to do. Here tonight, we're going to have youth group. It's only in our third week of having people actually come back in the building, and teenagers have to wear masks, and, but they understand that, like, if that's what they have to do and they want to come, then they're going to do it. And so I definitely have noticed the resiliency in kids way more than even our teenagers. So teenagers' minds right now, I think beyond everything else a teenager goes through, this has definitely been a huge disruption just because of the connection part, right? Teenagers need and desire connection, and that is really comes from being in person with their people and with their peers. And so there's definitely been a lack of that, which we've seen more depression, more stress and anxiety when it comes to, it's just that lack of being able to be close. But for the most part, I think that teenagers, and really kids and teenagers have been resilient in ways that I think as adults should look to. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's a lot of good stuff. Thank you, Taylor.
Yeah. The next question I had for you guys is going to be an interesting one. Okay, so when it comes to the election, there's a lot of division, right? So you could even think like in a family, right? So the question that I had is, what are the felt frustrations that you hear complained about most often in the age group that you work with? And how could we be people who sort of bridge the gap? Because we all have family members of all different ages. Like, how can we change our behaviors to kind of help them along?
Sure. So, every age demographic, there's great variety and great diversity. And I think a big part of my learning in my ministry is not to make assumptions of people based on where they live, how old they are, all those sort of demographics. And so I'll say sort of two things that come to mind when I think of my conversations with elderly congregants right now. The biggest one being values. And it goes right back to that grief piece of wanting to impart things that are important to them on younger generations. And I include myself sort of in younger generations, and we don't often model what it's like to have a healthy conversation in that. And so one of the best pieces of advice I got the other day, I'm pretty sure it was Ginger Rothus's Tuesday email. If y'all know Compassion Fix, I love her writings, and talking about having conversations with others to understand rather than to convince. Because I think, many folks my age and younger, we get a lot of wisdom and we get a lot of new ideas and we get really passionate. And it's like, I have to convince everyone of my rightness. And I'm not saying that we don't have our convictions and we don't have things that are important to us, but oftentimes that can hinder conversations with generations that are different from us. So having conversations with people who we know we might disagree with politically, with the mind to understand and say, how did you come to that decision? how did you come to that understanding can oftentimes be a really, really healthy way about it. And then a totally side note, but a very like specific issue is the concerns right now that COVID plus an election puts together on like healthcare. So that's a big concern for a lot of the folks that I'm working with, no matter where they are politically. COVID just brings that to mind, and there's not a lot of answers right now. And so there's, again, that fear and that grief piece of how do I provide for myself and how do I not burden my family financially with whatever this unknown future looks like if I need extensive care, etc. So
yeah, that's great. And I think that's a great advice, no matter who you're talking to, right? Is asking somebody a question and then actually listen. Try to learn something from people. I think that's awesome. All right, Taylor, what do you have for us?
Yeah, so I would say that the biggest thing that I always recognize with kids and with teenagers is to be mindful that they are always listening and they are always watching. And we don't like to think that all the time because we are not always the best examples. But even if we don't think they're paying attention, they are paying attention in ways that we might not realize until much later at a later time. And so I think a big thing is just, what we need to realize is that our kids are watching our behavior when it comes to like any of the political stuff. I mean, it's been heated, and they're watching not necessarily the nation stuff. They're watching what's going on in their own homes and how their parents may have conversations with their neighbors or their friends or with people that they don't agree with. And so I think that is definitely something to remember to take back into the home. Like, why do we believe this? So yesterday, my boys, I had my voting sticker, and my boys were like, well, who did you vote for? Who did you vote for? And I was like, well, that's not really something that like you ask somebody. I don't know. I mean, like I wouldn't mind telling them, but I was like, but then I knew that they were just going to go, my mom voted for whoever, And so, but it's also just like, why though, and it is like kind of what Claire was saying, it's on the value side of things. I don't know that us parents do a good enough job of making sure that our kids know why we value certain things, or when it comes to political stuff, why this side, or can we meet somewhere in the middle, which is where good politics are. And so I think that that's important. The other thing that I was going to say is that forgiveness, right? When there's conflict, kids are a lot quicker to forgive than adults are. And that also stems from the home. So, I mean, I work with teenagers that have no idea what real forgiveness looks like. And so I think that when it comes to conflict and frustrations and divides and stuff like that, the best that we can do is offer our kids and teenagers a forgiving home. Like, if they mess up, they know that they'll still be loved. If they, have any kind of let down, or they feel like they're not good enough, that they feel like they can bring that into the home, because that's when we start to see those behaviors, right, of the other way, going the other direction, the secrecy and all those kinds of things, is when they feel like they're not in a place that they can share openly if they do have, conflicting opinions or thoughts or anything like that. So
Oh, that's great stuff, Taylor, and very, very true that kids are always watching. That's some pretty it's pretty convicting stuff, I think, because it's like a lot of the times you see mirrored right back to you your different thoughts and opinions and beliefs, and that can be a real eye opener for sure. And you started talking about conflict. That's actually where we're going next. So pro tips is what we're looking for. Pro tips on how to navigate conflict with the particular demographics that you guys are working with.
Before we move to that, I just wanted to introduce Kathy Teater. She's been with us last week, so you might remember her introduction from there. She is a counselor. She is also our counselor, and she's going to be our generalist, kind of help us just think about our relationships with friends and peers that are adults as we move forward in this conversation. So, how to handle conflict. Claire, do you mind starting?
Sure. So I'd be curious, folks on this call, is there anyone who is either caring for an older parent or a grandparent, or in conversation with them over the phone in any way where that conflict might arise? just curious. I like to see, like who has those relationships. So one of the things that comes to mind for me is I lead or get to facilitate a caregiver support group. Right now we're meeting on Zoom in our church, and a lot of people share conflict as frustration. So a lot of frustration with the folks that they're caring for. And so often those frustrations come about when things that we're expecting don't go the way we're expecting. So those frustrations arrive when the phone rings. You think, oh, I don't have time to talk right now, but I know that they need to talk, so I need to answer it. And so then conflict arises because you don't want to be on the phone. Frustration comes up when you really need to get to the doctor's appointment that you drove there for, and they're not ready. And you're frustrated because it's taking longer than you needed it to take. And it's that empathy piece that comes in when you recognize your frustration. So one is empathy with yourself of, I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying to share love and compassion with either this family member, this friend, this elderly person, and then empathy for the other person. They also had their own expectations for this day. That expectation might have been, I really look forward to calling my loved one at this time, not knowing that you were going to be busy, or it took me longer to get ready today because I was in a lot of pain. And so it's that empathy for self and empathy for others that can really at least address that initial frustration and help you ease into, if it arises into more like conflict, it can put you in sort of a safer space for yourself and for that person to enter into that conversation.
That's awesome advice. I remember when I was at the church that we had to do a dementia, I want to say replication, like where you
did
put on
you did the virtual experience. Yeah.
So like I was amazed how many like senses are affected by aging with dementia, and I didn't know if you could say anything about that, just because it was really eye-opening to me. Like, no wonder that person has strong opinions or is irritable.
Absolutely, I'd love to. So I thought I had a lot of knowledge going into that virtual experience. We did it after you guys did it on staff. And so I had my volunteers participate in it. And I was one of the people who came out kind of like in tears, like, oh, that was way more involved. So what they do, they give you a list of tasks that you have to complete. And it was in a senior living community. So it was in sort of a standard skilled nursing room. And you put on shoes that have like little spikes in them. So that kind of imitates, is it neuropathy? Am I getting my medical terms? I'm not medical. So that's where my wisdom just flies out. And then you put on goggles that pull your peripheral vision just about here. And then you wear headphones that created all this background sound. And you had to wear gloves because you lose dexterity in your fingertips. And so one of the tasks was pick up 35 cents. I could see the 35 cents. I knew what 35 cents was, and I couldn't get it. And the woman behind me was saying, we really need to go, Claire, it's time to go. And I was like, I know it's time to go, but I see the 35 cents and I wanted to pick up the 35 cents and you're rushing me. And, she was just trying to do the virtual training and I like embodied that frustration immediately. And so I'm thinking of, that's just a small example of what people who face either physical limitations or cognitive limitations are going through, that I can only have the greatest empathy because I don't know what that's like.
And empathy, it is about the most powerful tool you can have in building relationships. It's like there's nothing in my life that whenever I feel stuck with somebody, it's like, if it's like I try to put myself in their shoes, it's like that's the only thing that can make my hard heart less hard, I think, a lot of the time. So
Taylor, kids and teenagers.
Hey, kids and teenagers. So I was thinking a little bit about that, and I think that if all of us remember when we are kind of that toddler age and growing up and all that kind of stuff, kindergarten, and you're learning things for the first time. And so I think that a big thing is that kids, especially they're natural reactors, right? And so like, it doesn't matter what happened, if it's really great or if it's really horrible, they're just going to react, and they don't know exactly like how they feel. But a big thing is, as kids are growing up, is to validate whatever feeling they have. And so like, you can be angry, you can be frustrated, you can have, big time anger, and that's okay, right? I think that when we're kids, that's when we're learning whether or not we can have anger in a good way or in a bad way, right? But yet we have to feel like we can have it. And so validating and affirming any kind of feeling. When you go up into a little bit of the teenage years, I think it's a little bit more of that recognition that you can't control what anybody else is feeling, right? Like you can only control what you're feeling. And that's a hard concept when it comes to being in a relationship with somebody, because we want other people to feel like we feel, or, if I'm angry or whatever. So, when you're little, you got to learn those steps, how you feel, and then what your proactive steps are to figure out how to manage yourself, right? Like some of us as adults don't know how to manage ourselves as well as actually kids do. But I think a big thing is feelings, and like with that empathy thing, kids don't understand what empathy is. Some of them, but then some of them actually can get it better than we can, right? Because like if their friend is hurting, then that means that I have to hurt too, and then there's somewhere that it disappears, right? And I think it's in our probably late teens to 20s that like all of a sudden then it all is only about me, and so. I think that, like I said before, I think forgiveness, if they see that in the home, if there's conflict, then they're a lot more open to bring issues or feelings that they might have when it comes to conflict. So, yeah, I don't know.
I kind of want to throw two follow-up questions at you. Okay. The first one is what to do, because I know these are just the classic questions and you can't answer them perfectly because every situation is different. But when you're just totally locked in gridlock, it's just a constant back and forth in your house with your teenager. And then the other one, what to do when your teenager is just totally shut down and withdrawn.
Well, I tell a lot of parents that if they're, they're not going to get, the teenager or the parent is not going to get what they want if it's a yelling match, right? There's just nothing good is going to come from that. More things that are going to come out of their mouths are going to be more hurtful than anything. So if a parent can be wise enough to walk away, just say, hey, you know what, let's pick this up in an hour, or it can be the next day, depending on what the situation is. I always say that, a teenager, man, if they're in it, they want to be in it, and they're going to push to get their point across or whatever they're hoping for, or to get their way. And so if a parent needs to walk away, I always encourage them, walk away, right? You're still the parent. And I think that that's what, especially with teenagers, the parents balance this. I need to kind of be a friend, but I'm also still the guide, the guidepost. And so how do I navigate that? I have to remind parents that you're still the parent, right? And it's okay to say no, and it's okay to walk away and then revisit that. Sometimes anger gets too high, and if it does, then I say walk away. If a student is withdrawn, that's a tough one, right? And that also comes from, you can have the most loving environment and a student can still feel like they don't want to talk to you, right? Your teenager might still be like, all of a sudden you might, have a relationship that was strong, and then they become this teenager, and then all of a sudden it is changed. I talk to a lot of moms that just don't get that with their daughters, or, and there's that strife that begins. I always encourage that kind of when there's a shutdown of communication, or if there's a conflict or anything like that, to make sure that there's somebody else in their life. You don't always have to be the person that is talking to them. Now, obviously, if it's something big, you want to make sure, but it can be a mentor. It can be somebody at the church. It can be a therapist. It can be anybody that they feel like they can talk to. And sometimes it takes time, and sometimes that's okay. Parents overreact a lot of times, and sometimes teenagers just want to be left alone, and that's okay too. I think if they're safe and they just want to be left alone, then we have to accept that as parents, that we have to say, you know what, I was a teenager once, and we try to remember that, maybe they don't want to, but there's expectations in a family. And if they don't abide by those expectations, a big thing is follow through. And that's been the biggest thing, is that if there is some sort of conflict or frustration in the family, that there's follow through from the parent side and the student side and the teenager side, because if they're asked to do something, they got to, follow it through. So I think time. So take your time, and then seek out help if you need help.
Oh, that's great. So consistent boundaries. I love that. Give them space for autonomy and coming into themselves. That's great. I loved what you said too about sometimes just needing a break. Right? I was thinking about our three general rules as Methodists. Right? The first one is do no harm, and that's exactly what that is. If you find yourself in a situation where it's like I'm getting ready to lose my cool or actually do harm in this relationship, step away from it. Of course, the other two, do good, which is also good. But first, you have to do no harm, right?
You're a dork, and I love you. Okay, so Kathy, how do we approach conflict with our peers, especially our friends? Maybe that kind that's like starting to boil in you, but you kind of just want to like not go there. That would be what I want to hear about.
A lot of the rules that we already have heard is kind of some of the stuff that you want to use with those conflicts too. How you start those conflicts, remembering that conflict doesn't have to be about win-lose. They're more about trying to understand each other, because we're talking peer-peer now, so we don't have an authority over someone else. We're peer-peer, we're friends, we're partners, we're equals in balance, and so it's learning to look at conflict not as win-lose, but how do we respect and hear each other out so that we can have empathy for each other and understanding, but also space to be different. And it's okay to be different because we're peer-peer. It's not like we have to go in the same direction, if that makes sense. Where in a parent-child, you have to be in the same direction, or there's got to be a solution to the end of it, if that makes sense. So starting out in that mindset of, I'm not here to convince my friend, I'm here to have my friend understand me and me understand my friend, versus my friend has to see it my way. Trying to stay out of that role, if that makes sense. Does that kind of fit what you're talking about?
Oh, it absolutely does. And I'm going to ask a follow-up question this time. So,
Okay.
I'm going to get you to do my job for me. The other day, I had somebody come to me and say, you weren't here when the part we talked about politics, so I'll loop you into that part of it. But I had somebody come up to me the other day and say, like, I just don't understand how my friends won't wear masks. I just don't understand it. It's tantamount to killing somebody. Like, how can I even go forward in that relationship? What do I do? What advice would you give somebody that's feeling like that? And not necessarily, it could be on either side of the political divide, but it's feeling that sort of animosity towards the people they care about the most.
Right. And the first step is to, like, you're kind of saying, how should you kind of respond to that person? And first off, just validation, which we talked about. I think Claire kind of talked about in the beginning, wow, I can hear that this is very important to you. I can hear that this was really concerning to you. Validate what they're saying, whether you agree with it or not. The part that they're speaking of, they're still your friend and they're still important to you. So you want to validate their emotions. So first off, just validating them. And then as as they get into it, you have to kind of always weigh whether it's a time and place for you to share. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes if the person is really just needs to be heard and just needs support, you can just be that friend that just supports. And so it's like, just validation, understanding when they are kind of going into, they're going to, harm somebody, that kind of stuff, just be able to say, we don't always know everybody's reasonings, kind of give light if you can, but don't argue, but try to open up that lens from that tunnel vision thinking to, there's things that we don't see because we've only had these life experiences. And there is bigger pictures for other people, if that makes sense. Sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just have to stay with validation if someone's really big emotionally charged.
Yeah, because it's hard to do anything in a relationship when there's not that goodwill, right? When there's not that mutual respect, and those things are earned, and that trust. You have to work to keep that sort of a thing too.
And there's a difference between having a conversation online and offline. So if that person's already heated up, that's an online conversation, and they're probably not going to hear you no matter what valid points you make. And once they come offline and they're a little bit more regulated, they're back in that green zone that we talked about, the green, yellow, and red. They're back in a green zone, then they can maybe have a decent conversation with you. But waiting until they're in that place where they could actually hear some of the things that you might be trying to explain to them, or helping them really try to answer their question when they come to you and say, how could people be like, if you're really trying to do that and they're in the red zone, it's more better to just validate and wait till they're offline, kind of take a time out from the conversation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I saw a silly meme the other day that said growth is, or I see that I've grown as a person because I deleted the whole paragraph and just texted back, okay. And sometimes that's pretty true, right? Like that in itself can be a little bit of growth. But also I think that when you are in a place when you're in the green, right, when you have that space and you perceive that your friend might too, is to be vulnerable, right? Is for you to say, like, use feeling words like, hey, ouch, that actually really hurt my feelings the other day, when something that was such a heartfelt belief of mine that you sort of made light of, or something like that, right? So
I had one more quick question on that for you, Kathy. So I see a pattern, not just in the church, but definitely in the church and outside of the church, of you go from we're friends to something explosive happens and we're estranged forever. So like, I'm a huge believer in boundaries, right? So I definitely think that there's room to, remove yourself from certain relationships, or not let yourself, get as involved. But like, what are steps in between we're besties or we're in the same club at church and we're never going to speak again, like, that are healthier maybe options?
And to tack onto that, like, where is the line of like, I don't want that sort of toxicity in my life, right? Like when does it get to the point when it's like, this is actually a relationship that's doing more harm than good, and I should step back from it?
Yeah. And kind of, it's, if I want to make sure I'm understanding right, you're kind of talking, how do I, if there's been an injury in the relationship, kind of the repair piece was kind of one. And then the other one is knowing when something is actually starting to harm me. And when do I change, kind of try to start to change the relationship without having to just cut off? Give me other options than just, my only option is to walk away and have nothing to do with you. So the first part would be, learning how to repair in the green zone. So repair, being able to, if we've had a really big disagreement, we saw that you voted one way and I voted a different way. And now how do we be friends after that? It has to be done in the green zone. It has to be done where it's like, you know what, here's the third things that we have in common. We both believe in God. We both support our church. We both have kids that are this and this age. We might not see eye to eye over here, but that's okay, because there's these other things that keep us together in relationship, and let's focus on those and continue to grow those. So finding those other commonalities, or those other third things that most relationships have some kind of collateral in, and not just letting the one thing overshadow those other things. So again, back to that positive thing we were talking about last week, finding the positive in the relationship, not just focusing on the negative. And then that gives you that place to be able to start to heal in that. And then the second part, when you're like, wow, I'm getting too emotionally involved in this is starting to be too toxic for me, those kind of things, being able to start to, in healthy ways, give the person back the information, instead of trying to help them with it. So oftentimes they're bringing us stuff and we're like, well, try this and go try this and do this. And we're trying to help them solve it. And when it becomes unhealthy, it's usually because we're doing way too much of carrying and not enough of supporting. And so trying to go back into more supporting role if we're trying to not completely cut off. So when, this is what my mom said, and then she said this, and oh, really? Are you going to take that to her? So you're handing it back instead of saying, well, I would have said this. So you're doing more of the hand back of the emotion and the problem than you are taking it on and carrying it. So does that make sense, or is that helpful?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
I might add one more thing to that, especially with on the teenage side, right? Because we see a lot of that, like your best friends one day and then you're not the next. And I always encourage teenagers, especially, to just sometimes you need a timeout, right? Like, I mean, and if you need a timeout from your friend, then that's okay. And so taking time away and accepting that time away can sometimes really, like, sometimes just acknowledging that time away will bring that relationship back. Sometimes not. But then the other part is like when, like there's a deep loss, right? Like, or maybe there's just not a big loss. So I always challenge, especially teenagers, to say, like, without this friendship, what would you be losing? And then if it's a friendship you want to continue, then, like, what will you gain? And if they don't have good enough kind of things to say, and that kind of allows them to evaluate whether or not it was just a surface friendship and it's okay. And maybe they, like, if they see them, they can be friendly and that's great, but then maybe it's okay to let go of, like, but I think then when we start to evaluate sometimes, the other person might feel the same. And then that friendship can just be a friendly one and not necessarily a deeper relationship. So anyway, that's what I would add.
Yeah, those are great. Yeah, great points. Yeah, timeouts are always wonderful. And everybody gets to breathe a little bit in it. And there is times that it's sometimes it's better to walk away. Sometimes it's better to go ahead and set the boundaries. So yeah, great points. So
one thing I would like to talk about that I didn't put in the questions that I thought I'd bring up, but I know that all three of you have experienced this and might have something to say, is can you like explain to people what a codependent relationship is and how that might pop up? I don't care who does that, but like when we're looking at how things can go awry in relationships, I feel like codependency is a big part of this. And I feel like it's not something we talk a lot about in the church.
mm-hmm. I was gonna say I'll ante up what I've got and then let you guys go. Basically, when you're saying codependency, it's got this element of I'm now emotionally responsible for somebody else. And so it's really when you find that my motivator isn't, I'm not doing what I'm doing because I believe it's the right thing to do, or I believe it's in my values or what God's called me to do. It's more in, if I don't do this, you're going to get big and scary, or you're going to yell at me, or you're going to go off the deep end, or, do something harmful, or, things like that we're really scared of. You're going to go on a drinking binge. So it's when we lose sight of our own self and give up our own self and start to really look at that other person to direct us. So we become in a reactionary mode, is the best way I can say that. And so that's when you find a relationship where you really feel like that other person is what I call driving your bus. They've got a hold of your emotional steering wheel. That's really where we're talking about a codependency relationship, and your identity pretty much is based off of what they are calling their needs are versus what God called you to be. So I'll turn it over to the other experts.
I would say, in addition to that, is that too much of an investment, right? You all have those relationships that all of a sudden, like, you are just way more invested than you should be, or common codependency term is fixer, right? Like, they've got a problem, I'm going to fix it, or I can fix it, for them if I spend enough time with them, or if I do enough things, around them, or, if they see my example more, or, any of those kinds of things, can be that codependency model that a lot of caregivers naturally tend to fall into. So like if we're caring for somebody, then all of a sudden we just, it just becomes natural. And so codependents have a lot of work to do to make sure that they don't fall into that, to figure out the boundary, right, of what's just a healthy investment in somebody and for them to live their own life, and then how I'm supposed to live my life and be in a relationship with, my own life and figure that out. Because a lot of codependencies have a lot of issues themselves.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. So that was one thing that that Catherine and I we sort of try to serve as good checks and balances with each other, even when it comes to like pastoral care and things like that. Right. It's like Catherine's like, Andy, do you really need to be helping that person right now? And it's like
No.
a lot of the times I'm like, oh, she can see that better than I can. And it's like being able to have people that are close to you that know you and that can help safeguard that is really, really helpful.
So what do you do if you think, oh my gosh, that's me. I might be in a lot of codependent relationships when you just heard that description? What would be your advice?
I'll say it's not something I see a whole lot, but it's certainly something that comes up in like caregiver support with people who've been caring for a loved one over a long period of time, because it's not like you go from they can do everything independently to they need 100% assist. It's like this slope of, okay, they need help like kind of getting dressed in the morning, so I can help with that. And then it slowly becomes like, oh, they also need help with cooking. They also need help with all these things. And when you take them on just a little bit at a time, sometimes you're not able to see, oh, we've come this far. It's, oh, just from yesterday, it's only gotten this much more. I only have this much more role in their life. And so like, it might sound like a cop-out answer, but a lot of times I'll invite people, if I start to see that dynamic of, have you considered talking with someone professionally about this? And not, one of the things I've been trying to learn, and this has been one of my goals recently, is sometimes I can make it sound like a shame thing, like, oh, you're broken, so you need to be fixed. And I'm trying to think if this was Brene Brown or what wise woman put it in this way that said, like, you deserve to have time to yourself, and you deserve to invest in yourself with someone who's a professional who can process this. And so I try to put it in that phrasing, like, it sounds like you've got a lot going on and you really deserve to be able to process this with somebody. And so trying to like put it that way has been sort of helpful for a couple of folks I've worked with, because it's easy to get codependent when you're caring for somebody. I mean, it happens.
Claire, I didn't even think about that, but that's such a smart connection there, because when we're talking both about kids and we're talking about people who are elderly and aging, there is an inherent dependency sometimes that comes with both of those. But just making sure that you, as the person giving care, that burden's on you, I guess, to be the one making those boundaries.
Well, and I might also say we see sometimes, at least when I see a lot of students graduate, right? And the parents then struggle almost more than the students do, because the parent has been literally living their child's life. And at the beginning of the call, I said, oh, I don't have a lot of hobbies, right? Because all of mine are my kids. Well, there you go. So it's kind of like, but when you do see a married couple or a family go on without, experience some loss and grief from, someone moving forward with their life, but yet if they can do that and not feel this sense of loss, but a sense of accomplishment, that's a good indicator whether or not you are, doing everything. And we all know those teenagers that that their parent is doing everything for them, don't we?
We've got a few more questions, then we're going to open it up to questions for you guys here, a little panel. You guys have these people here who are great to answer your questions. Okay, so the best way we can help or connect with the people in your age group right now, and that may be even taking COVID into consideration, I don't know, but also just in general, like as far as pastoral care, how do you connect?
I can do mine too really briefly. So this is what we've been inviting people to do with either their elderly family members or congregants, is connect with them and help them find purpose. So this almost goes exactly with like the codependent conversation, is so many of us with great intentions are like, what can I do? How can I like give care to these people who are isolated and can't get out? And what we've found is that this really neat sort of flip side is happening, that a lot of people who are elderly and isolated are reaching out and saying, what can I do? What can I do to reach out and connect with people? And so inviting people, like, receive that care. It's not just about us making the phone calls or writing the letters, like also receive the letters and receive the phone calls and receive the wisdom that's being offered. So it's like a neat dual thing to connect and also help people find purpose.
That's very helpful advice.
Yeah, we've actually had some folks who are a bit older in the congregation saying, that's the only connection I have with the outside world right now, and that's what's bringing me joy. And they're telling me about pastoral care needs I didn't know about, because they're functioning basically as like CCNs, which is how the church should be.
Exactly.
You know? So.
Exactly. Like some really beautiful stuff is coming out of COVID. I'm like, why didn't we think to have elderly folks call their elderly neighbors? Because of course they're going to be able to connect in a way that I can't. It's just like, duh.
Yes.
And it's beautiful.
Yes. And they have time to write a note to a teacher who's struggling, or to, you know, it's these things that it's like, oh.
Yeah, the things that maybe to me, because I'm busy and running around with kids, it seemed like a burden to me. It was like that. It's like, take that off my. That's life giving, right? That which is that's the body of Christ too, which is cool.
I'll go with the kids and teens, and a lot of them overlap, but I was thinking about the thing that I hear a lot from the teenager side of things is that, you know, I mean, they're dealing with so many things, right? They have so many stressors in their life. I mean, as we all do as adults, but, you know, I mean, they have expectations and different kinds of pressures with school and whatever kind of parental pressures are put on them, or social media pressures. And I mean, there's all sorts of different stressors in their lives. And I think a parent, for, you know, when their child is young all the way up to their teenage years, is this concept of having no agenda some days, right? Like, I think that their life is so busy, right? All of us. I mean, it doesn't matter if we've got, you know, one child, no kids at home, like all of us seem to be extra busy. And in light of COVID, like I thought, oh, the world's going to slow down, right? Because we're not, you know, doing as much. And I think kids even feel this, like, oh, you know, like I'm even busier. And so sometimes having just no agenda, and offering that to your kids, and to, you know, to say, it's a Saturday, what do we have to do? Like, if it's possible, because I know that, you know, there's games and there's all sorts of different things, but yet to have a Saturday that you can look at your kids and your teenagers especially and say, you know what, we've got nothing. Like, what do you want to do? And to like offer that up is like this huge sigh of like, what, you know, an excitement for a smaller kid, right? Like, we've got all day to do whatever. And then for a teenager to be like, you know, and also to allow that pressure to come off and say, you know what, you need to sleep in, let's sleep in today, you know, or, you know, the night before. But having no agenda is huge. And then obviously offering time, you know, with that kind of no agenda thing, but offering time, definitely as a parent, making sure that you have time from the distractions, right? Like if you have little ones all the way up to teenagers, it's what they see in us is how they end up valuing time. And then, I mean, I know you'll probably get to this, but the kind of the pastoral care thing for teenagers, especially, is just to offer that presence, right? Like just showing up. So like if you, like teenagers and kids, like if you say you're going to do something, then do it, right? Show up for your people, and in any capacity that can be right now. If that's on Zoom, even though our teenagers have major Zoom fatigue right now, they don't want to connect this way. They want to be in person. They are done with Zoom, but if we can get them to log on, even that little bit changes a little bit in their spirit to feel like somebody was present with me and somebody showed up for me. So showing up and having no agenda is even better.
Yeah, and if that sounds just like a crazy, inaccessible thing, maybe that's a reminder that we need that, right? We need to carve out that space and force ourselves to do it. How about you, Kathy? What do you have for us?
Kind of piggybacking on the being present, but I think for right now, as hard as things are for people right now, just being present with them, truly, when you ask, how are you? Eye contact, being available emotionally, having empathy and compassion, so people really know that you're there and you're sincerely asking, how are you? Versus just a casual, you know, here, that's off my to-do list, check. So that would be my number one thing, is just to really slow down, be present, be really emotionally available. We connect through our emotions. We don't connect through, logic stuff that we just kind of pass back and forth. We connect through the emotions. And then using those third things in our life that we have to connect with people. So making sure that we know what our third connection is, because a lot of people, that is how we start relationships, is knowing we go to the same church, we have kids the same age, but knowing what your connection points are so that you can really go towards them feeling important and valued to you, and that you guys can really share in that. And focusing on third things to connect over. Even if we don't have anything connect, the next door neighbor, don't know her very well, but she has flowers on her front porch and I like flowers. So there's a third thing. Let's try to connect over that. So looking for those opportunities of third things that we can connect over. And we don't really, a lot of times we don't look at people like that. We look at them more like, our own anxiety kind of comes up of, what am I going to say? What are they going to ask? And it's like, nope, just find a third thing. It'll all go good from there. It's an easy tool to be able to use. So those would be my two big things that would help connect more of the community and have less loneliness during the pandemic, which I think has been huge.
That's awesome. Third thing is great. I was talking to some congregants and they were saying, some people were saying, oh, I feel like everybody is way more friendly right now. Like if you actually talk to someone in the grocery line and you ask, how are you? It's like, watch out. They might actually tell you because they haven't seen anybody in weeks.
Theo is shouting to strangers, I love you. He actually is.
And then other people, it's like, because it takes so much longer, like behind the mask, to break through that, to say hello, other people feel less connected. I was just interested to hear that from some congregants, that people are feeling both ways when they go out and about the community. I've felt, once I've talked to people, in eagerness. We've had long conversations with random people lately. Okay, so here's my last question. What do you do? What's your advice when you feel at capacity caregiving? So caregiving for the elderly, caregiving for teenagers and kids. And then Kathy, you could either say caregiving for friends, or you could just say being in relationship.
Well, and I can start that. One of the first in caregiving, or caring for yourself, which is kind of what this is directed of. Last week we talked about the green, yellow, and red. The most important thing is to know that each one of those levels needs something different. So if I'm in the red zone, so I'm maxed out, I probably need to do some distracting. I probably need to do some really downtime. I probably need to do something that allows my brain to just kind of check out, so to speak, until I can get to the yellow zone where I can actually do things that are helpful to filling my bucket back up with helpful things, which is prayer, reading inspirational quotes, listening to good Christian music that kind of washes over us and has us fill up and feel good. Affirmations are beautiful. Taking bubble baths, massages, relaxing, anything that has us, be able to really do self-care. And then green zone, that's where we really don't need much self-care. We should be ready to go. So knowing your zone and what you need in each of them and what works for you is probably the most important things that I can say in that self-care bucket. Oh.
Yeah, and it's not always Christian music. Whenever I turn on Christian music, which I like, Catherine gets really, really mad. For her, it's either rap or maybe Beyonce or something like that. And but yeah, the Christian music has the opposite effect on her.
So irritable.
So know what genre you need for you. So how about you others?
Go, Claire.
Okay. So I was going to offer self-compassion. One of the things, at least for those who are actively caring for an elderly parent, sometimes some of those things aren't exactly accessible. Like respite care is really hard to find right now. And like any type of day programs that people used to have access to, most of those are still closed. And so there's just a lot of things that used to be fantastic, amazing coping resources and things available in the community that just aren't right now. And so that can be really, really hard for people who are actively caring for someone. It's just like, where do you turn? where can you possibly go? And so just trying to get people to offer themselves self-compassion, like take 10 seconds. If that's all you have, take 10 seconds to take a deep breath, offer yourself love, let yourself remind yourself that you're doing the best that you can. And if that's all you can do in that moment, that's all you can do that moment. And we just keep praying for some of those other resources to open back up, because honestly, those will be so life-giving when they can happen again. So yeah.
That's a great word, Claire. Thanks.
I would say along the lines of what they already said, I wrote down first, like, just to be okay with any small accomplishment, right? You know, I think that like we expect a lot of big things from ourselves or our families or our neighbors or our communities, and just, you know, saying like, hey, you know, I said hey to my neighbor today, you know, or whatever. And just looking at even the small things that we do, and realizing that those might seem small to us, but might be big to somebody else, is offering. And I am a big proponent of, like, especially when it comes to the teenagers, serving, right? You know, like helping somebody else. It gives us this, you know, whatever in our brain and in our heart, this ability to give ourselves care, right, when we feel like we are offering somebody else something else. But then the other thing I would always say is to define what you think failure is, right? You know, a lot of teenagers really struggle with what failure looks like. But I think that often they don't know what it actually means to them or to their standard or whatever their value is in their family. And so if they have a conversation in their family about like, what does failure look like? But then on the flip, what does perseverance look like, or what does hope look like? And, you know, trying to relate some words that go along with those, and some different feelings that you feel when you feel failure, or, you know, perseverance and hope, and knowing that there's a difference between the two, and being able to recognize and identify those things help us to be able to keep moving forward. And so I think it's really interesting, the words that you would get from an 8-year-old, right? Like if they defined failure, what would that sound like? It'd be like, I just can't do it, right? But then like on the flip, what does perseverance mean? Well, I got to keep trying. Like, you know, I mean, you don't just like not learn how to, you know, tie your shoes. I mean, hopefully by the time you're 12, you can learn how to tie your shoes, but you don't give up, right? You know, and so like, but having those conversations of like, it's okay if we can't do this and do this really well all the time, but then what does it look like when we can't, you know, if we're a family that doesn't give up, or we keep trying, or, you know, so, but recognizing what those two things are is important for their hope to be hope. So
That's great, guys. We're not quite done. We're going to do questions, but I just want to. We knew we had the right people, and that has become even more abundantly clear as you guys have talked and shared. What an absolute gift you guys have given us to be here with us tonight. I am going to open up to questions. I know I've already gotten one in the chat here that I'm going to let them ask for themselves, but you guys be thinking as with this first question, if you have any questions for our friends here.
And if you want us to ask it, you can send it in the chat.
So I'm the one asking the question. I was wondering what Taylor might say about this. Our oldest kiddo is exploring gender differences, gender norms, that sort of thing, and is settling right now on being non-binary. And during this process has lost friends. Also, a lot of the friends that they've lost, it's more because of the parents feeling like at 11 they don't want their kids exposed to someone who is non-binary or trans. And what do you recommend? What would you say to that? Anyway, that's just sort of, yeah.
well, I did see that Maxwell is living in your home, and that is very exciting. So, you know, it's tough. I mean, and I will say that we are seeing that more teenagers today are more accepting of their own fellow peers than ever before. And so that is encouraging to us, right? Like, you know, for the future of our world and all the future generations, but it is the parents, right? Like, and unfortunately you can't fix that for Maxwell. And you know, like you could try, but it'll probably not be like any kind of outcome that you would want. So the only thing that you can do is just, you know, just listen and be present and encourage them to be able to express however they're feeling, and validate that you are going to lose friends, and you know, and maybe with time those friends might come back, maybe with time they won't, but you know, we're a family that loves you and we are here for you. I mean, just repeat those, and I know you know that, to repeat those words, because who they are right now is maybe not who they're going to be, but that's any teenager, right? You know, and so like what they're going through right now is that blip on the radar when it comes to who their best friends are going to be, you know, or whatever. So like really talking about what they value in a friendship, and if those boxes aren't all checked, then maybe it's okay to let, you know, let it go. Making sure that they know that they can come if they're feeling made fun of, right? You know, or whatever. It's going to be a tough journey, I'm not going to lie. And so letting them know that you are a safe place to land, right? You know, like is all that you can do. I mean, and just reminding them of their worth and of the love that you guys have. Friends, whether or not in that, you know, in any kind of gender identity, I mean, that is one of the biggest stressors for teenagers anyway. And so it'll, you can do it because there's a lot of love there.
Taylor, thank you. Well, what a good response. And that's got to be the hardest part about being a parent, right? Is to see your kids hurting and going through that sort of thing. And the most important job as a parent is just continuing to love them through it, and giving them that space where they can, where they do have a safe space to learn the hard lessons of life and still feel loved. That's great, Taylor. Thank you.
And we're wired to be mama and papa bears, which is also not fair, because like a few weeks ago, I just felt like everyone in the world was being mean, probably because of politics, but people just weren't being kind. And I came to Andy and I said, that's it. We're going to a farm in the middle of nowhere and we are hiding our baby boys from this evil. Yeah. And he was like, Catherine, I think there's a few steps between here and there. Like you have that like in your blood to like, when it's people that you love, to say, no, like this has to stop. I'm taking you away from this. I'm going to make it right. And yet we can't. And so like modeling the resilience it is something that I think is important, to say people are going to, in the world, are going to be that way, but we aren't. Yeah. This is what we're going to stand for as a family. But sounds easier to live on a farm sometimes. Yeah,
I almost beat up a 6-year-old one time that was pushing Theo around on the McDonald's play place. It's like, wait a second, he's got to learn. It's probably better if he has a dad that's not in jail, like for beating up a kid. You know, it's whatever.
Well, and I would also, Amber, say to seek out some other moms and dads, maybe that have walked the journey. You know, like that they, you know, they've maybe been through some of those different kinds of conversations, or, you know, what breaks their heart breaks yours kind of conversations. And so like finding some sort of network or support group, or, you know, even a Facebook group that, you know, you can just be like, you know, I mean, and that's what we need, right? I mean, that's what all of us need on any journey or any stage of life that we're on, is just people to be like, you're not alone. Right. And I hear you, and you know, I might not understand. And that's the thing, you won't be able to understand. And that's hard. But you can find other moms and dads that have walked that journey and feel a little bit more encouragement and some hope that maybe then you can offer them.
If we do, sorry, Amber, did you have a follow-up?
I was just going to say thank you. I appreciate it.
If we did a lightning round, we might have time to field one more question if we go a minute over, if anybody has one. Okay, good, because we were about at time anyway. So, so normally one of us would close it out, but Claire, Taylor, Kathy, would one of you guys like to close it out in prayer after we do a little goodbye?
Claire's really good at praying.
Yeah, I see. Yes, that's awesome.
I'm happy
So,
to.
guys, thank you again so much for being here. What a blessing you have been to our congregation and to us personally. It's been a joy to be with you guys, and we thank you so much.
For those of you in this group today or watching later online, if any of this opens a can of worms for you, know that Andy and I are here, and all of the panelists here are very kind-hearted people who I'm sure could give you some wisdom and some love as well. So, all right, Claire.
Claire, take it away.
Yeah, let's pray together. Oh, gracious and holy God, I thank you for sacred spaces, even online, even for those who gather at a later time. God, you are the God of before, of after, of now. And so you're here with us. And that's such a beautiful and sacred thing. I thank you for the wisdom of the folks who've shared, for the encouragement that we can be compassionate with ourselves, with our neighbors, across generations, across political lines. God, you call us into community with people who are so different from ourselves. And it's in that community that we find life. And you've called us to this beautiful and difficult thing all at the same time. So thank you for the chance to learn from one another, to listen to one another, to truly journey alongside one another during this time, seeking to understand and be understood, and ultimately to feel your love and to share it with others. We thank you for that. Be with us as we leave this space. Grant us your guidance, your wisdom, and your love. All this we pray in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you guys again. It's so good to see you, and we will see you soon.